Hello and welcome to episode 3 of The Climb, the podcast in which we discuss CBS's The Summit. Today we're going to talk about episode 3 called Snakes and Ladders. And yeah, I'm Florian and I'm joined by my co host Kinley.
And we're just the couple that loves to go on adventures and think that we can do the summit from our couch.
Easy peasy, no problem. All right, let's jump right into the episode. We start the episode with some beautiful mountain shots, beautiful scenery, and we get one of our cast members saying, I wish I had my phone to show this to my family. And in that, obviously they don't have their phones, but I for some reason I wasn't thinking of it, and in that moment I was like mind blown. I don't know why. Like, what did you like?
Amy, yeah, I think it was Amy who said it. It sounded like Amy. I loved that quote because it's like they're filming this whole season and they have so many shots and so many like professional cameras and stuff to be able like she's on a show that her family's going to be able to watch and see what she's seeing. So I thought it was just really funny.
That's true. That's true. All right, we start day 3. Um, in the camp, we see Patty saying it was Becky that basically led the charge on that vote. We see Dennis basically just swallowing a fly in his confessional. Super funny moment, I thought.
Yeah, I thought that was so funny because like that it was just like a very outdoorsy thing that I feel like happens to everybody. Like you're just like if you're just like walking and talking, sometimes it happens. I thought that was funny that they left that in there too. And then like I going back to like Theron really thought that Sweta was gonna make it further than she did. And like I know like last time we were talking about how like they were close and it probably was a tough decision for Theron to vote Sweta out. Like I was like surprised that he was on the fence. But like I really think he made the right decision, like he for himself to move further, like voting her out, like sticking with the majority and voting her out. But like it does show that they were close.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I thought it was interesting because, like, we start the episode right after the vote, so at night, basically, in the camp, and we see all these conversations that happen after basically Shweta left the camp and is voted out. We also see Nick, and he says that he didn't want Shweta to go, obviously, because he had kind of an alliance with Dennis Shweta and himself going on. And then we see Becky super happy, maybe a little bit too happy, but we can maybe get into that because it kind of is like a story throughout the whole episode that Becky's just she's on a high right now, maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, Becky Lee it starts off strong, like you said, like it goes through the whole episode, but like Becky Lee was I haven't done like so happy and like it reminds me of how in the last episode like Sweta was like on this high as well of like I ran that vote and now I have control of the game. Like nobody can stop me kind of feeling. And like I know Becky Lee maybe like her vote it's or the vote of voting out Sweta was nobody had really like a target on them of like they were the ones who controlled the vote, but I like Becky Lee, I feel like she's like hidden. Like I don't think that anybody really thought that like she was the one that ran the vote. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. I think she's playing a good game though right now.
Yeah, I think she is too, but I think she's definitely getting a edit of somebody that's gonna be like a target coming up. But we can
I
talk about
agree,
the
yeah.
challenge in a little bit because maybe she put a little bit bigger, like a bigger target on herself in the challenge. But we'll talk about it when it comes up. We also see Jeff saying that he doesn't trust Dennis, and we get the flashback again for the second time, which I thought was interesting, of Pumpkin telling Jeff that Dennis was throwing his name out there. And then we see basically the whole group going to bed. And I wanted to talk to you about this, the tent situation. So we see, or from what I thought, we see those dome tents, the yellow dome tents that are set up by the North Face. I thought it was interesting because like, I think they have 2, right? So the group kinda splits up. They have, like, groups of, like, 6, 7 per tent, or maybe they have 3 tents with, like, 5 or 4 people in them, right? They
Yeah.
don't all sleep in the same tent.
Yeah, they have separate tents, and that's the thing, like, that can also control, like, who you're with in that tent can also be maybe, like, insight into what, like, groups are forming. I mean, that
Yeah.
comes back to, like, last time, like, who was in the tent, like, when, they started talking about voting Sweat out, but yeah, I do wanna go back to, like, Jeff and Dennis, like, their beef, and, like, how, like, Dennis, like, tells Jeff, "I would never vote him out. I would never vote you out." And they're, like,
Um,
buddy buddy, like, best friends. And then we see this throughout the whole episode too. It's really like a Jeff versus Dennis episode.
well, it is in some sorts, but I think it's more Dennis versus Jeff and not like, Jeff doesn't like, yes, he wants Dennis out because he's like, he's the only one that's throwing my name out for, like, practically because I'm a physical and a social threat. But Jeff, maybe we can get into this in a little more detail later. But Jeff isn't really, he's not really playing the game. You know what I mean? Not the social game and like the strategic game, so to speak. I think he's just a very nice guy, in my opinion. And like he just wants to get the whole group up and whatever. He's not really strategically, he sees it coming, but not enough to like do anything about it, I feel like.
I think he's focusing more on the summit part of the game, like the physical aspects of the game of like trying to get to the top
Yeah.
as well. And so, but he's like a super nice person and everything. And so, like, I feel like he's trying to be strategic, but he also like maybe isn't seeing that like Dennis actually has the numbers. Because then we talk about that later, but like it's like I think Jeff was like really felt confident in that he had numbers and people on his side.
That was true.
But yeah, I think it was funny how Jeff was like, "I can read him."
We're gonna get to the crying scene in a little bit, but
Oh yeah.
it's gonna get crazy in this episode. But looping back to the tent situation, I'm curious if, like, I'm guessing they get to choose who they sleep next to or with in a tent, but that usually tells you a lot about alliances and stuff because
Mhm.
people, just like on Survivor, people usually sleep next to their alliance members. Um,
I mean, it
yeah,
makes sense. It's like one of like the only like private areas to
it's
talk
true.
on the camp. Like it's not like people are like wandering off like very far. Like like the shots that they take, it's like here's this like small group talking strategic talk and then the person that they're talking about is like what, like 200 feet away, like not even.
Yeah,
Like you can see them in the background.
yeah. There was one scene where I think Rob wanted to get into the tent or something, and they like close it, and he was like, "Oh, they're having a
Yeah.
talk in there. I can't go in there or something." All right, we so the whole group goes to bed. We get a little good night scene basically, and we continue the episode in the morning of day 4. Amy's complaining about Jeff snoring, which I thought was funny. It's always a topic, but I didn't expect Jeff to be the one that's snoring. How would you handle that?
That was so funny. It was just the way that she what did she said, like as soon as she came, like Jeff came out, she's like, "Jeff, we have something to talk about." And she's like, "It was so loud the tent was rattling."
Yeah. I mean, she was
It was
nice
so
about it.
funny. I know, but she
She was
just
very
like
much
handled
mom
it in
about
a
it.
very, I know. It was funny. But I think it
Yeah.
also comes back to like they're working together and so they have like a really good relationship and so but yeah, that was
Yeah.
funny. I'm like, so then can the other tents hear him snoring too? Because it's not like
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't handle it. I'm not gonna lie. I would go crazy.
yeah, but what do you do? Like that's just like how somebody sleeps. I
I
mean, I
know,
just
but
push you and you stop snoring, so
I don't snore. You snore. All right,
it's about to be a
continuing
Florian
on.
versus Kinley situation.
Who gets voted out? I have
Who
my
gets
strong
voted
alliance
out?
members. Lavi is a strong alliance member.
The
He's a
pets are
meat
not
shield.
involved in this.
He's a meat shield. Okay, continuing with the episode, we see Becky talking to Nick in the morning while everybody's getting ready. And again, she's very much getting the edit of like playing way too hard and feeling way too good about herself. She's talking to Nick about the strong guys basically seeming to bond together, them being like a a big threat, so to speak, and she's worried about it. So she's really trying to plant that seed in everybody's mind. And she's like, "Oh, I'm planting seeds in the morning." Uh, she feels great about herself. I think that's usually pretty dangerous.
She feels very confident. Yeah, it kind of made me nervous because I was like, "Oh my gosh, is she actually going to be the vote?"
Yeah, I was thinking that too at that point.
Like, because I know like the producers are really guiding you in that like the Jeff versus like the that dynamic between Jeff and Dennis, as we talked about earlier. They're really guiding us through that dynamic. But then when like Becky Lee is like on this like high and everything, I'm like, okay, but is it actually like is there gonna be a twist? Like what is
Yeah, yeah, I thought something was coming, but we'll get to that in a little bit. All right, we see Dusty as the group takes off from the camp, the second checkpoint camp. We see Dusty taking the lead, taking over the map, and we get a little Manu voiceover who explains to us that the next checkpoint is a 2-day hike away, so they're not expected to make it in a day, obviously, and it's going to be the hardest trek so far. They will have to set up a bivy camp for one night at least to make it to the next checkpoint, and we also get a little hint or little scenes that show us that the incline is going to be even worse than the days before. Um, I'm always confused because so we get them starting to hike and stuff. Like they're literally just walking straight up that mountain. You know what I mean? Like not there. There must be trails somewhere, but obviously they're not using them.
I don't know though, because sometimes they're on a trail or path of some sort, and I don't know if that's just an animal path that they've found. Because I mean this could actually be like a terrain where there's really because like if it snows and stuff, like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think like obviously once they get to like the snow parts, to more of the alpine climbing parts and trekking I guess not trekking, but the alpine climbing stuff. Obviously, you want to stay on the ridge line so you don't have anything above you that's gonna like avalanche you away. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So that makes sense. But right now, they're literally like walking directly up the side of a mountain. I mean, it must be a production choice, obviously, that they're like, oh, like the pictures, and it's just more strenuous and it looks crazier to go.
I mean,
Like
they're
it would be
given
kind
the
of boring.
map and like how to that's the thing, like the production could be like, okay, this is the path, this is how the map goes,
Yeah, that must be.
and that's like kind of how they want them to go. But
Yeah,
I mean, is that the best way? Maybe not, but that's how they want them to
yeah,
go, I guess.
yeah, probably.
But yeah, I thought that was so I think that it's probably good for them knowing ahead of time that they have to set up a bivy camp. And that's like we talked about
Yeah,
earlier. I was like, no way are they not gonna have to set up another bivy camp.
yeah, we're gonna get to it in a second, I guess, but just to hint towards it, I didn't know they got food in the bivy camp. Honestly, I was
I don't think
surprised.
they did at the first one.
Yeah, I guess because this is like a planned bivy camp.
Yeah. I think the unplanned bivy camps you don't because they like
Gotcha.
had to eat the food that was in their bag.
That makes
But
more
it's
sense.
almost like they knew that they were gonna have to set up a bivy camp if they were like carrying food in their bag.
Yeah,
So I don't think
that's
they're
true. How
carrying
much more
food.
food do they have in there?
I don't
I
think
don't
they
think.
are. I don't think they're carrying any more. Like I think it was just for like one night.
But then that this is actually a good topic. But so they hike all day. Let's say all day, have this crazy challenge in the middle. Obviously, they're eating during the day, so they must have something in their backpacks or little snack
Are they
stations on the way.
though? I would hope that you get snacks along the way. Like that's like
Or or you have to like fill your bag in the morning with like yesterday's pasta. Just throw it in there.
I mean, I would. That'd be a great hiking snack. But yeah, no, I'm curious about that because we never see them like I mean, they stop and take breaks, but like the first day maybe were they eating snacks the first day? Why do I feel like they were
I don't think we ever saw somebody eating like a snack or snacking or something, but they must like
they have to. I mean, that's like
otherwise like
maybe
these people are
not.
not trained. They would pass out hiking all day and then climbing up a ladder or something.
I mean, I guess they could get like a full breakfast.
Well, maybe they're not.
Some people will
we
eat
need
before
our
they start
cast members
hiking,
on here.
so
We need our cast members on
yeah,
here
we
to
need
clear it up.
a real experience. But yeah, it does like seem like so as they start hiking, like they're going just crawling up this hill.
Yeah, that's true. And we see Patty as they start hiking. We see Patty saying that she thinks her social game is keeping her alive, which is basically pretty true. She's playing a pretty good social game, I would say. Do you have any thoughts on Patty and her social game?
I mean, Patty gets along with everybody, I think,
Yeah,
and that's due to her personality. But yeah, I she is struggling a little bit, and I'm sure she's has that same feeling of like we watched Bo leave, and like Tony had to be helicopter evacuated, and so I'm sure that's in the back of her head too, like thinking about that. They do have to make it to the summit, so it's like it is a thought, but it's interesting because like it's not as much of a like threat to not be physically active, I guess, or like physically like capable and like not struggling. It's like I haven't seen that as much of a threat as I thought it was gonna be.
yeah.
Like a threat to be voted out, I guess.
I think it's interesting that, like, dynamics wise, so obviously in the beginning it was Tony who had to get medevac, but was like in like the back of the pack with Bo. Then Bo alone was the back of the pack for a long time. And now like it's Patty and Amy are the back of the pack, but let's say like in 3, 4 more episodes they might be gone. I don't know. Then it's going to be probably like Genie, who's going to be the back of the pack. Like, it's always interesting that, as you vote out the back of the pack, you just have a new back of the pack. It's always going to be the same discussion. Like, these slow
Yeah.
people, these strong people, who are we voting out? So I think that's kind of interesting as
And
this
like you said,
continues.
like this like episode was like probably the first episode where we really got like more of like like a ton of strategic play, like straight from the beginning of the episode. It really, I think the last vote really split people up, and people actually were like, okay, now this is like a major strategic game rather than
Mm.
like, okay, we're just voting out the like back of the pack.
Yeah, that's true for sure. We see a funny scene with Amy. She's like on the incline talking about how steep it is, and she has her arm. She's like showing with her arm like straight up, like vertical. She's like, "This is 90 degrees," and then she goes like halfway down or something. So this is like 50. So it must be like a 50% incline, which is definitely not. But um, I thought it was funny.
Yeah, that was funny.
we, for some reason, while we got this like climbing scene, like up the steep incline, I got the feeling of a medevac coming up, but it wasn't in the end. Like I said, like in the last episode, I was like, oh, the yellow, like when we saw the previews for the next time on the summit, we saw the yellow helicopter again, but it wasn't the actual medevac. But we'll get to that now. Manu, again mentions the mountain keeper in a voiceover, and the mountain keeper is always observing the group's pace and stuff. So we get a little hint here. We see Dusty saying that Amy and Patty are slowing the group down, which we've basically seen like 30 times by now. And we see the mountain keeper actually showing up, like the helicopter flying over and dropping the yellow bag, but doesn't drop it where the group's at or like close to the group, but like seemingly all the way back down the mountain. So I thought that was kind of crazy.
Yeah, because what Theron says, he goes, she drops this bag 99,000 yards away from us down this hill, and they're like, nothing good from her. Nothing good from her. Like, it cracks me up how they're like, they know that it's gonna be bad.
Yeah,
It's gotta be something. But yeah, they really do. Like, it's like down the hill. Like, it's
it
quite
is.
far. It seems like, oh, that's like where we started. So go back to the start and pick up this bag.
Yeah. It was kind of crazy far, and there are only a couple people that would even be an option to go retrieve the bag. And
Yeah, you
obviously,
can't
it's
have
a
everybody go down there. Like, you've already,
no.
it comes back to like the people in the back of the pack. If you made them go back down there and then come back,
Yeah.
it just burns way too much energy. So yeah, what do you think about, because it seems like immediately as soon as the bag drops and like it's down there, like Becky is like the first one to be like, I'm going down there. Like, I'll go down there, but she says it in a very, like, friendly way that doesn't make it seem like it's, like, a gameplay move. But then we see in her confessional that it was very much a gameplay move. Because when I first, like, saw her doing that, I was like, "Oh, it's just because, like, she's, like, just trying to prove herself," like, I didn't see it as, like, a gameplay thing, but then when she was in her confessional, I was like, "Oh, I guess she really was it was a gameplay move." Because then she's like, "Oh, Nick," and then, like, Rob, like, volunteers, like, as well. So what did you think about that? Like, the just, like, her, like, jumping to it?
I mean, I guess it follows a theme that she's playing really hard. Like, she's starting to play really hard. She's really trying to not even give Jeff a chance to like get some kind of decision or like advantage out of this. But I was surprised when, so as you mentioned, Nick and Rob join her. So the trio descends down to retrieve the bag, and we see obviously Nick and Becky are pretty closely aligned from their conversation in the morning and what happened before, I guess. And they really tried to pull in Rob for a potential decision they would have to make on the spot. Um, so they've really worked, like they really work Rob and try to pull him in. And what I think is interesting in regards to that is that they're always like, "Oh, you wanna," or they kind of push him, like they pressure him into working with them because like they're seemingly the majority, and you want to stick with the majority. Blah blah blah. What do you think about Rob and him making the decision to basically go along with him from like at this point?
I mean, like you said, like, he did seem, like, hesitant because him and Jeff do have, like, they do, like, at this point, have, like, a good bond together, and so it did seem like Rob was, like, pretty hesitant about it, but, I mean, he also is trying to stay in the game for himself. It's not, like, he wants to stay in the game and stuff like that, and so, yeah, I was quite surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised that Becky and Nick were trying to rope in Rob by any means, because this comes back to, like, Becky picked them because, like, she was trying to be strategic about, like, who went down there. I mean, that is a great opportunity to talk to people in private, but and, like, they didn't make it look like it was strategic as picking them to go down there because they also made this, like, promise of, "Okay, we'll wait to open the bag until we get back to the top."
Yeah, they stay true to their word to take the back up and open it
I mean,
with
I
the
think that
group.
was smart because if they didn't stay true to the word, then they would all 3 have a target on their back.
Yeah, for sure. That's true. So they take the back all the way back up. Rob is like carrying it, I think, as a backpack, which I thought was kind of impressive. But it also seemed pretty empty. So, so they carry it
Because
back
there's,
up.
like, one piece of paper in there.
It's this huge duffel bag, like, but yeah. So they carry it back up, and basically they're presented with a choice of being able to send two members of the group um, up to the next bivy camp by helicopter, or they say by to the next camp by helicopter. And here was the first time where I was question was I was like, is it the next checkpoint or the bivy camp? Because this makes a big difference, obviously.
Mhm.
But it would be it is the bivy camp, and but this comes at a cost, and the cost basically is that they wouldn't get any food at that camp for the night. How would you? What do you send the slow people up, and you're able to increase the pace, but no food at night? What do you think?
I was very shocked at, like, we do see them vote. I was very shocked that Jeff was the only one to vote
And pumpkin,
against sending people up, and Pumpkin. I was so surprised at that because I think I would have been on that side of the vote.
yeah.
Because, like Jeff said, I like, food is fuel. Food is fuel.
No, I agree. Like the food is definitely what they need. In my opinion, I can't do like hiking all day and then not eat.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, this comes back to, like, they had to be eating snacks, right? Like,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you can't hike for like the people are struggling. You can't hike for 2 days without food. Like they're
I know,
struggling
and
even
so,
with the
like,
food.
even if, like, that's what I'm saying. So even if, so they do get to take this helicopter to the next bivy camp. They still don't get food. I mean, they were still hiking. It's not like they didn't hike at all that day. And it's like, okay, you still have the whole next day to go through. And
And you're
then,
probably halfway up already anyways.
yeah, I don't know. I would have been with Jeff and Pumpkin on this one. Um, I would have been on that side of the boat. I was really shocked. I think it was like maybe Amy and Patty or the back of the pack, like they wanted to be able to be like, okay, we're not the ones like slowing them down if they don't make it. And like maybe that's why they voted for the helicopter because they're like, okay, if we're out of the equation of us getting to the bivy camp, then we won't be blamed
Yeah.
for not making it.
Yeah. We basically see that Amy's saying she's holding back the group, and but at the same time she voices her concern about um the vote being between them two, basically, since they're the back of the pack and they got the ride on a helicopter. But we also see that Becky is strategically, she really wants to keep in the slow people. But yeah, as you mentioned, Jeff doesn't want to miss out on the food, which I think is smart. So he and Pumpkin end up being the only ones that, um, as you said, vote for the food and not the ride. So with that, the rest of the group votes for Amy and Patty to go on the helicopter, and I thought this was a very I thought it was a funny scene when they take off in the helicopter, and Amy's like having a great time, and Patty's like holding on for dear life because they put him like on the door, like the open door, feet
That
out of the
was such a
helicopter.
Yeah, that was such a production move to have them like on the outside of the like hanging off the helicopter basically. But yeah, Patty was like you said, terrified of the helicopter ride.
Yeah.
Why is everybody on here scared of heights? Like what is the
Well, I don't, like I'm afraid of heights too, but I don't know how it would be in those. Not, I don't think to that extent. No, I think I'm just obviously nobody. I think there's a distinction. Like a lot of people say they're afraid of heights, but people are just generally obviously afraid of falling down a great height, which is like normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't know. I guess like Theron, for example, is definitely afraid of heights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like as they get dropped off at the bivy camp, and of course there's like a little letter there for them saying they won't get food because they agreed to take the helicopter ride, and so they really feel like you said like kind of like they're the ones that are gonna be targeted because now they're not with the group, so now this gives them time to talk about them and they're in the back of the pack kind of deal, like the same story, and so um it made Patty and Amy feel really nervous, I felt like. And
Yeah.
it's funny because then they're even questioning, they're like, are they gonna get here tonight? Like, how long do you think how long do you think we have to sit here until they get here? And stuff like that. And then we do see like Amy and them like and Patty like wanting to like, okay, we need to like do something for the group. And so they're like, okay, we need to like start a fire, like do something, which I thought was very, very generous and very nice.
They definitely have like a fire starter in there for sure, right? Because they didn't really struggle to start the fire. Like it's not like they have to use a flint like a or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. They don't really show that. They don't show the camp life, do they? But
Hmm.
it seems like the group like feels like they made the right decision.
Well, until they get to camp and don't have any food.
That's true. But like that's what we see like on the scene like of them hiking. It's like, oh, they wouldn't have been able to do this. Like, do you think they were just like saying these things to like make themselves feel better about the decision that they made? Like, you know how sometimes like when you're hiking up, you're like struggling, but then on the way down, you're like, oh, that was like the hard part's over. Like
Yeah, I think it's part of it. I mean, I don't know.
Like,
I
when
thought it
they're
was
like,
kind of
"Oh,
a
like, Patty and Amy, they wouldn't have been able to do this, like, they would have been struggling on this part." Like, do you think they were saying that to make it feel like they made the right decision? But, like
yeah, for sure. I mean, there's practically no other reason to say it in that moment, I would say. Because I feel like that's the only reason why you would say something like that in the moment because you know, right when you get to camp, the thought of being like, we could have had food right now. Like we would have gotten here an hour or two later, but we could have had food. comes up, and at that point, you're gonna regret your decision. So I guess you gotta enjoy it until as long as it lasts. But we see the group come, like as you hinted towards, we see the group actually make it to the bivy camp, and we see them come up over this beautiful like stone ridge, which looked really cool. I thought, and they can see the bivy camp, so they put in a last effort and join Amy and Patty, who started the fire. We see a lot of funny scenes around the fire. We see um, we see Dusty's impression of Manu, which I thought was great.
That was amazing. I was like, I'm glad we're not the only ones like talking. That
Yeah,
was funny.
and then we see Jenny's background. We see her becoming an athlete at the age of 33. Now she's like into like mixed martial arts, teaches Muay Thai. She's also a referee, and she's a cat lady. Her two cats are Dante and Elila, I think. Right? I think so.
Mhm. Yeah, I like
And
Jenny's backstory. It was so funny how like she was like, "Okay, change my like little
yeah.
my career or whatever to crazy cat lady." But it really seems like she said like her goal in life is conquering, and she just really seems to jump into any challenge. And like she has such a diverse background of like different things that she's like tried, and I think that's really inspiring, and that's why she's out there like for her potential in conquering another challenge.
Yeah, that's true. We see Rob's background story as well. He talks about being a kid and feeling like he's different. He was struggling growing up, and him finding his passion as an educator to really help the kids that are struggling like he was when he was a kid, to basically help everyone find their place in society and in life in general. And he says now his life is awesome. So that's great for him. Any thoughts on Rob?
Rob. I love Rob.
Yeah.
He seems like he's really found his like passion in life and what he's really good at as well. And I know that was
Yeah.
like probably really hard, like growing up, like being judged your whole life. Like that is really hard. And but I'm really glad he's been able to take that and turn that around and help other students and other kids feel like they are welcomed and finding their place in this world. So I thought that was really, really nice.
That's true. Now we're gonna get to one of the craziest scenes off the
Take a
summit
deep breath.
so far.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath. Yeah. So we get Dennis, and we're thinking, like, as a viewer, you're thinking, okay, we got these two campfire background stories, so now we're getting a third one. Okay. So Dennis is like tearing up right from the start. He's talking about um, how he hasn't been, or he feels like he hasn't been there for his family, so like, the money would be huge for him and all this. And then we get a hard cut to him, like in a confessional interview, and he just says he can cry on demand, which is kind of wild. What did you think about this whole scene?
That was a little much. I don't like Dennis for this. I know it's part of his
Yeah,
gameplay and him like it's part of like showing I mean you can say anything you want out there, basically. And you can show whatever side of you want, and so his side that he wanted to show was him breaking down, and like I hope the whole that they need money thing is accurate as well. I mean, I think everybody would appreciate the money that they would get from this show, like no matter who you are, like I think you would appreciate receiving that amount of money. But like there's everybody has a reason for being on there, but him like breaking down on demand, like I could like tell it was a fake cry. Like I don't know if you could, but I was like it was, like, a little much, like, it was going into, like, the deep breathing, like, the hyperventilating type of crying, and I was like, "This can't be real. This can't be real." And then him just, like, confessing to him, being like, like, "I'm a great strategic player." And I'm like, "Is that being strategic?"
well, I would say, like, maybe to add to your, like you said, you can say whatever you want out there. I feel like you can say whatever you want at all times, in a sense. but it also makes you a good, a bad, or like like in that moment, it maybe like we can argue about that. Arguably, it was a good strategic move. It made him a good strategic player or a bad strategic player, depending on how people perceive him crying and stuff or how they see him. But in the moment, definitely doesn't make him a good person to like put on the show and lie and stuff. I don't know. I thought it was kind of weird.
It was, yeah, I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of it.
But we see, at least from the edit we get, it kinda, I would say, works on Jeff because he's like, oh, maybe he's all right, after all.
But I thought
So
he
I was like,
sees through it though.
this. I thought this was the first moment where he was like, maybe Dennis isn't as terrible as I thought.
Okay.
But I mean, you're right. By the time they get to the next checkpoint, he's back to, oh no, Dennis is
Yeah,
terrible.
that's true.
So the next thing we see, or where we continue, is in the next morning. So day 5 at this point. We see them waking up without food. We see them packing up the bivy camp, and we see a little scene between Pumpkin and Jeff, where they basically talk about being in an alliance, being each other's number ones. And we actually get we get a little information about the conditions. So for the first time, we see what altitude they're at. So they're at 4,860 feet right now, which isn't terribly high, but fairly high, I would say. But they're definitely going to keep climbing. So that's going to get crazier pretty soon. And it's 38 degrees Fahrenheit right now, so pretty cold or pretty chilly, I guess. But if that warms up like throughout the day, kind of perfect hiking weather during the day, but maybe a little cold at night, I would say. And then the wind is
Oh,
at
really cold
24
at
miles
night.
per
Yeah.
hour.
I would be freezing at night. I don't handle the
Yeah,
cold very well.
yeah, that's true.
But they have all their North Face gear, so
Yeah,
they're
that's true. There.
very they are very prepared for that kind of weather. And I'm sure the
Yeah,
production staff made sure that they were very prepared.
yeah, that's true. So they start their hike on day 5. We see Patty and Amy struggling a little bit again. We see Dennis being super hungry, and then we see Dusty with a oh scene, and we get our first intro of the ladder. The ladder is basically set on this huge rock front. How would you describe it? Like it's basically this huge rock. How high do you think that is?
It's a long ladder. It's a tall ladder. Um yeah, they of course like in their scenes it's like drifting in the wind and basically hanging
Um,
over this rock cliff. But
It's probably
I
like
don't
60, 75 feet, maybe.
mm,
Nah, that's a little long, maybe. That's a little too 40, 50,
no, but
maybe.
I would say so, yeah, like 60 to 70.
Yeah, I
It
think
was
that's
a
about
long
right.
like they were on the ladder for a long time.
Yeah. We get multiple people saying this is the biggest ladder I've ever seen. And so basically, they get to the sign again. They read the little note they have, and we hear that the first person has to also, additionally to like going up the ladder, obviously, also carry some equipment up. And with that equipment, they would be able, basically a rope and like a pulley system. And with that equipment, they would be able to pull up everybody's backs. We get Nick being terrified of heights, and Rob like directly asks him. He's like, "Nick, this is you go first." And Nick's like, "Hell no!" Like he's not going up first.
That was so funny. That was so funny. Like of Nick being like, I'm so afraid of heights, and then everybody like trying to get him to go first.
Yeah.
So I guess he hasn't told anybody that he's afraid of heights because like everybody else like on the bridges and stuff like that in the past 2 episodes, you know who was afraid of heights. So I didn't know that Nick was afraid of heights.
But they definitely know. They definitely know because when he goes up the ladder, which we're gonna get to in a second, and the helicopter comes
No, I
in,
know they know
people.
this. I know they know this episode, but I'm saying before this episode.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
when they were like being like, "Oh, Nick, you should go." Like, of course, as a viewer, we see his confessional of like, "I'm afraid of heights," but we didn't see that before because, like, in other episodes, there was other people like as they're like going up to the bridge, they're like vocally saying like, Theron is literally like, "I don't like heights," like, all that stuff, so
Yeah, that's true.
I thought it was funny. I don't think they were, like, ironically, like, trying to pick Nick to go first because he's afraid of heights.
Yeah, I mean, probably not. That would be a stupid game move. But the interesting thing we see is Amy wants to go first. She volunteers to go first, and from my perspective, love her enthusiasm, but I don't think it's a good idea. So just with her up to this point, without knowing how it turns out, what do you think of Amy volunteering to go first?
I mean, like you said, I think it was, like, she really wanted to prove herself, and I think it was smart to try to prove yourself, like, especially after, like, okay, you had to get you were picked to be airlifted so the group would move faster. What is stopping us from just being like, okay, it's time for you to leave the group, like be voted out because you're slowing the group down? So, I mean, I think she was smart for making the move to, like you said, like the enthusiasm, and it's like, yes, it could have ended very badly, but I think the group still would have appreciated her attempt in trying to prove herself.
Yeah. I kind of agree with you, but in the moment I was like, "This is terrible." Like I thought she would be go like I thought she would make it up, and then the group would be like, "Okay, like we have to vote her out now." I thought if she just like stuck around, people would keep like Becky wants to keep her around, people want to
Yeah.
keep her in alliance as a number, you know, to make it further
Yeah, I
that
mean,
way and save her
possibly.
energy. Yeah, that's what
But
I
I
thought in
think
the
that was like
moment.
a risk. I think that was like a risk that she knew and that she was like willing to take though.
That's true. So we see her wrapping the rope around her shoulder, and we see her starting her ascent on the ladder. We see her going up 20% ish, I thought, in the camera angle. And she kind of like drops down and falls a little bit, gets caught by the safety harness. And then we see her continuing to struggle, and we see a switch of the camera angle. And she, at that point, she was about like 10 steps up on the ladder. And I was like, this is
Mhm.
exactly what I thought would happen, and why I thought it was like kind of a dumb move from her. But then we get a background story for Amy where she talks about like the tragedy, but it's kind of crazy, of her dad um, dying on the morning of her wedding, which is unimaginable.
I I was crying. I'm not gonna lie. I had tears like in my eyes. Like that was, well, I mean, it started even before that. Like her dad being a single dad, like raising her and her sister. Was
Maybe,
her?
yeah,
Sorry, I'm not recalling. But raising them and, like, raising them to, like, always, like, conquer their challenges and never quit, and, I thought that was, like, really sweet and everything, and, like, I was already kinda, like, tearing up a little bit then, and then, like, then hearing the story, yeah, of him passing away, like, on her wedding day and her still going through with the wedding day because we saw that picture of her and her husband and, her 3 daughters, like, and that looked like it was, like, on their wedding day. You wouldn't even know that that tragedy happened, like, that morning,
yeah,
and I don't know, that was a very yeah, I was tearing up, but I think she uses that as motivation and power to get up the ladder and to not quit.
yeah. We see her like basically, like you said, turning that into her motivation and her wanting to set precedent for her girls to never quit, and she keeps going up the ladder, and then we pretty much see her almost up, and she ends up making it all the way up, which I thought was kind of crazy. Like I did not, after
Yeah.
how the first 10 steps, that's crazy. I was very impressed. Good job, Amy. That was crazy. With that rope too, her on her shoulder.
I'm even more of an Amy fan now, like,
That is crazy.
social queen.
But, like, I just have so many like, from how she looked on the first 10 steps, like, I don't know if it's the edit or what it is, like, they definitely played into it too, but from how she looked on the first 10 steps, that must have been, like, a out of body moment, you know what I mean? Like, the
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, like, how many people have climbed a ladder like this? Like, it's not like a ladder that's, like, sturdy and it's, like, leaned up against something. Like, this is a ladder, like, literally a rope ladder, basically. Like, it's twisting and it's like moving and it's like you do have to move like you do have to use like all elements of your body at all times.
Yeah.
Like I probably would have had the same experience. Like it's like you get used to something like you like I probably would have had the same experience. Like the first like 10 steps like I would be like trying to like figure out what the best way
Oh, that's
about
what you're
this
saying.
was. Yeah, like I
That's true.
which I think for everyone, they kind of played in on that at the beginning of their start of like their ladder climb was like kind of like the ladder was like wobbling everywhere and like but as you keep going up, you're kind of like, okay, this is how I need to climb the ladder.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
That makes so much more sense, yeah. Because for
So I mean,
me,
I think
and
they were playing
definitely
off of that.
yeah, yeah, but for me and definitely how they edited it too and how, like, story-wise they were telling it, it was very much a moment where, like, you know those, like, stories where it's, like, a car accident and a kid is, like, trapped under a car and a mom, like, summons this incredible strength that she
Mhm.
can't summon to, like, lift the car and pull out the kid and stuff. Like, it
Yeah.
was like, they definitely went for that kind of out-of-body experience moment, like,
But yeah, I
motivated
mean, I'm
by,
sure
obviously,
it
the
still
tragedy.
looked like a really hard challenge. Like I mean, I think I would have been struggling as well.
No, for sure. Thought it was super
So,
impressive. Crazy.
yeah, I'm impressed by everyone cuz everybody made it up.
Yeah. So after Amy making it to the top, we see Patty going next. She loses her helmet. It's like tangling it. Like it was crazy. It was like
Why did
choking
that
her
kinda
out.
happen to, like did that happen to somebody else too?
Theron, right?
Yeah, I'm like, are their helmets not, like, strapped in right?
I don't know. I'm confused too.
Because it
I
looks
don't
like
know.
they were. It looked like they were, I don't know
Maybe a little loose on the bottom, and then
I know, but it didn't look like that, but maybe it was, like, I'm like, "Okay, they didn't put these on right."
yeah. So with Patty going next, obviously the two people that got the helicopter ride on the day before stepped up first, and the group seems to really appreciate it, which was good for them. And I guess their strategic move of offering to go first kind of worked. We see Pumpkin going next, and we got another. I don't know if it was Rob or who it was or Nick or somebody basically yelling up. Like Pumpkin is like halfway up the ladder and somebody's yelling up, "Any advice, Pumpkin?" And she just super dry. She's like, "Don't talk to me." I was like, not the best gameplay, maybe, but still funny.
I know, but, like, sometimes you've been in those moments, like, sometimes you want words of encouragement, and sometimes you're like, "That's the last thing I wanna hear right now."
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes you're like, "Oh, I love when people, like, are encouraging me," but then sometimes you're like, I need to be alone."
yeah, for sure. No, I completely agree. We see a little cut of Becky talking about wanting to get Jeff out again, and I thought it was a little too much, or at least from they definitely want to edit her that way too. But then we see Jeannie talking about how she hates ladders, and we see her going up and really struggling. And at that point, I was like, this challenge is taking forever again. Like with reading, with like it's at least 2 hours minimum, 3 hours.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think the challenges do take a while, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, there's a lot of sitting and waiting while other people go, 'cause it's, like, one at a time. But Jeannie was funny
Yeah.
because like, she's talking about how she hates ladders, and then they go and then she's like, "Oh, my dad was a roofer."
Yeah. She's like,
Like,
I
so
ain't
she
going up there.
literally had, like, her like, he would, like, try to get her to go up the ladder, and she was like,
Hell no.
"No, I'm good." So it's, like, probably, like, her childhood, like, coming back to her, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I should have climbed those ladders."
Yeah.
When I was little.
Yeah, that's true. So Becky ends up going next, and she again gets like the little like she really has a chip on her shoulder. She's like, I want to show these macho men how it's done. We see her background as a construction manager, which is obviously a very men dominated profession, and she's really showing off. Like she flies up the ladder. Everybody's like, she's crazy strong, and somebody says she's kind of a threat. So I don't know why she did that.
I don't know either. Like, I'm all about women showing power and all that, but like, I'm like you. I think it was putting a target on her back, and I think it may have been coming from. We know that she's like on this like high of like I'm running this game, or not, maybe
Yeah,
not running the game, but like I'm on top of this. Like I'm on the top, at least in like doing really well, which she is. She is doing really well. Like She's been on the majority votes, like, she has an alliance. She is physically strong, can make it to the summit physically, but and I think she's trying to, like, prove herself even more, which, like, it's like, okay, there's a line, like, you really don't wanna, like, show yourself because then it's like, Jeff, why are you're saying that Jeff is a threat because he's super athletic and friendly, and it's like, okay, well, if you keep showing off, that's what you're showing is that you're physically a threat and also socially a threat.
Yeah.
So I think she should have just like laid it low, like climb up the ladder, like that's fantastic. Like go fast, that's fine. But like skipping the rungs and like doing that kind of thing was like I think taking like a step too far, but maybe it won't affect her game at all and maybe it was just something really small and it got them moving on from the challenge faster, but I don't know if it was the best decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. We continue with Theron going up. He again we got the fear of heights. He's really struggling, slips off a couple times, definitely gets like supported slash caught by the harness a couple times. The safety harness they're locked into. And he's super close to the end and still really struggles. And he has like 3 steps left and he
It's like the camera shot is the camera from the top. Like you
in
can
his
see
face.
him.
Yeah.
And that's where he's like, "I don't think I can do it." And I'm like,
You're there.
you're
You
right
already made
there.
it.
You're right there." And I think it was because like he said like he couldn't get like his hand on the rung. I don't know. I was like, "Grab anything you can. Like you already made it all the way up the ladder."
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Finally, we see the group that's up there starting to pull up some of the bags and money. We see Rob go, we see Jenny go, and we see Dennis, Jeff, and Nick being left as the last 3 people down on the bottom. Where we see Nick offering Jeff that, like, no, Dennis is like, oh, you go ahead. Or like Nick, I guess, ends up going last, can go last. What did you think about that move?
I thought it was very interesting how they were the last three.
Yeah,
It made for like a very strategic kind of play there at the end because I mean I think they were kind of because in the past like when you're the last person like from a challenge going up like there's always like there's been a decision in the past of like oh this person may not be able to actually make it through the challenge so that was like a thought they did talk about that but um of course Dennis and Nick are working together and of course they want time to talk about it I guess and so I wasn't surprised that they were like, "Oh, Jeff, you can go first. Like, go ahead and go." But it
yeah,
was like they were very like buddy buddy. Like they weren't trying to make it look like they wanted Jeff out. But then as soon as Jeff left, they were like, "So that's who we're voting for, right?"
yeah, yeah. As soon as Jeff goes up, which I thought was a good move. Like so far, being the last person on the bottom was always a bad thing, which it wasn't in this occasion, but it could have been, I guess. You never know what they see up there. Um,
Hmm.
so I thought it was like a good move to establish a tiny ounce of trust with Jeff, I guess. Which maybe it's too late at that point, but it's still some move in some sense.
I think that was just
Um,
like giving him like a false reality. I think
a false sense of his
like a
security, maybe.
false, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think it doesn't take like it doesn't seem to take too much to be on Jeff's good side. I think he's a super friendly guy in general. So it seemingly, I would say. So maybe because he was reconsidering like his opinion of Dennis at some point this episode. So I was like, okay. But yeah, like you said, we have Dennis and Nick left on the bottom, and so we get the alliance as per Nick is Nick, Dennis, Becky, Theron, and Rob, and maybe Patty and Jenny ish, I guess. They were saying like they think they can pull him in. And then we get the plan that Dennis will nominate Jeff, and they'll basically vote him out that way.
I like how now they have to like discuss like who's gonna nominate this person.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of an interesting dynamic in that sense, even though the voting is kind of stupid, as we mentioned before.
Yeah.
We see Jeff at the top. He definitely knows something know something's up, like they're talking about him probably on the bottom, and he wants to nominate Dennis. He says he has Pumpkin, Amy, Dusty, and Rob on his side, and Dennis and Nick make it up, or Dennis makes it up, I guess, and Nick goes up as the last person, and we see the mountain keeper coming in one more time. The helicopter flying right next to the ladder, which was kind of stupid. It wasn't even super windy, I would say, this time, but still some
That is,
turbulence.
like, crazy that they just, like, fly in and they're just, like, sitting there, and then like, this ladder is, like, already, like, twisting and, like, turning before the helicopter gets there, and then when the helicopter comes in, it's, like, even more so, and I just felt for Nick, like, so much because, he's, like, scared of heights,
Yeah,
and then you have this helicopter, and it looked like he was just, like, holding on for dear life, and, like,
yeah,
I would be even more anxious in that moment too. Like, there's just a helicopter just sitting there. But then it's like, do they just, like, look at the people in the helicopter? They're like, "Hey."
man, I don't know, just a weird scenario, I guess. Um, he makes it up eventually. Like the helicopter leaves, he makes it up, and yeah. So now they're ready to make their last little hike to the next checkpoint. And again, we get Manu and a voiceover from him where he tells us that the group is still behind pace, which I wonder when they're not going to be behind pace anymore, honestly. I feel
I
like
know,
they're
when
always
are
going
they not gonna be behind? I mean, like,
to.
give them a chance, like, give them
Like, what did you expect?
uh,
And they run into the first little snow patch, I would say, which was kind of funny.
yeah, that was so cute of them. They were all, like, playing in the snow, or at least, Vicky Lee and a couple other people were playing
But
in
they're
the
definitely not
snow.
in a rush. They're definitely not in a
I
rush.
know, they're just, like, playing around, I was like, "Maybe this is why we aren't on pace." But, I mean, maybe that was a good little break. I mean, you have to build morale, you can't just continue to be, "Okay, let's go." Like, you know? So I think it was, like, a good little moment for them.
Yeah, I guess it's like a happy moment in some sense. Well, after like 5 hours of playing in the snow, they continue to make it to the camp eventually. And we see Dusty. He's super excited for food since they didn't have any last night. And he again says he wants to vote out some of the slow people just to move faster, basically, and get on pace. They make it to the camp and they have pasta and bruschetta, which was very yummy.
Yeah, it looked really yummy, actually.
Manu shows up and he tells the group you look like a pack of rabid dogs, which Manu.
Oh, Manu.
Uh,
He's doing his
and
best.
I think the questions he asks are so pointed towards certain people,
I think
like
this happened again because this happened in the last episode. I feel like he, like, guides,
the vote with his
like,
questions.
the vote with his questions. Like, it's not as, like, open-ended as you would think. Like, they're very much like, "Did you
Yeah.
think about this?"
Yeah, he's like
And it's, like, very, like, like, directed.
for sure. Some of the like he asked Amy a certain question. What did he ask Amy? Like about being slow and her being worried, obviously, which I thought was fine. But there was one very pointed question towards Jeff, uh, which was like, "Oh, being like the strong people, do you have a target on your back?" Blah blah blah. And I think it's way too, yeah, way too like you got to ask more general questions. Yes, you're gonna get more general answers, but I
Yeah, but
it's
you don't want people to feel like then obviously people are still, like, reading the group at that point. And so when
yeah.
Manu is, like, asking those directed questions, people do take that. They're like, "Oh, okay, well, if Manu's asking these questions, I need to be asking those questions about those people that he's asking it
Mm,
towards."
yeah, I agree.
And I
I
think it
don't think
does
that's a good,
influence it.
yeah, for sure. And I don't think that's a good thing. I thought we saw, for the first time, we saw actually like pretty big division in the group during that conversation, I think, with Manu, which was interesting. Um, and Manu leaves us on his last little comment where he says he'll have to play Snakes and Ladders, which is also the title of the episode. A little cringe, but yeah.
Have you ever played that game?
Yeah, I definitely played it as a kid.
The
Yeah.
board game?
Um, What do you one question, I don't know why I was thinking about it in a moment. What do you think if it's a tie? What happens? We haven't seen a tie yet, obviously.
I'm guessing with like the way that it's like very like open-ended votes that they would have to discuss further and actually and come to a decision. Like somebody would
Unanimously
have to
then?
flip the
Or one
no, I
person
think they
flip?
would have to yeah, they would have to switch their votes. Like maybe they would have like a discussion or maybe like more time and then they would re-vote
Hmm.
like the same way they vote. But like given that everything's like very open-ended, like I think they would like have to come to some conclusion. Like it wouldn't be like, oh, in Survivor, like we have like the rock draw and like stuff like that. It wouldn't I don't think that that's
Yeah.
what they
Yeah,
would
you're
do.
probably right.
But
I kind of want
what
to
do you
see it
think?
now. Well, I think you're probably right. I don't think they come to a I don't think they will have to come to a unanimous decision. But yeah, probably just the way you said it, but I'm curious to see it, honestly. After Manu leaves, we see camp getting more hectic leading up to the votes. We see Pumpkin talking to Becky. She wants Patty and Amy out for being slow. Becky definitely doesn't want that since she wants to keep the slow people around. She wants to get out the macho men, which I was like, what did the men in this group specifically do to you? Like, I don't think they're machos. Like, Dusty and Jeff don't seem like machos, I would say.
Yeah, she really does have a target towards the men. I'm like, okay, well, you still need like physicality to get to the top of the summit. Like, let's
Yeah,
not
but
forget
like,
like the premise of the show is like getting to the summit as well.
yeah, I mean, my comment, I guess, is more so like towards macho men is like very negative. Like, like
Yeah.
if I guess we're not seeing everything, but I doubt, like, from what we've seen so far, the people that would be considered like macho men just from their appearance, like specifically Dusty and Jeff, like they're not walking around being like, "Oh, honey, like save your energy. We're the men here. We're gonna provide for you." Like it's not like that's the
Yeah, I
vibes from
agree.
them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Again, shows her chip on her shoulder. I guess good for
Mhm.
her. We see Amy being super scared of being voted out because she's the slowest. They got the helicopter ride as before, and she's talking to Dennis, and Dennis ensures her. She's like, "Oh, you're fine. We want to vote out Jeff." And Amy says straight up she's not going to vote for Jeff, which good for her for standing up for her own opinion. She's pretty much the only one, but we're going to get to the votes in a minute.
Yeah.
Um, she says she's aligned with Jeff, and they're, I guess, have become friends and alliance members, and she will not vote for him. We see Rob saying he heard Dennis and Jeff like as names being out there, and he's talking to Amy at that point and somebody else. And Amy is definitely campaigning for Jeff to stay. She's like, "Oh, it's too soon to vote him out," and Rob agrees, but Rob is definitely a floater. What do you think?
I don't think they see like how much more deceiving Dennis is versus Jeff. And I was quite surprised by that. And maybe Dennis is very good at hiding that. And that's like part of his like strategic game. Like when you're looking at Dennis and Jeff, like Jeff is more of like a people person, maybe a little more of like a physicality. But out of the two, I don't know. I would have voted to keep Jeff, but yeah, I was interested that Rob like kind of like switched, and maybe he was influenced by Becky Lee and Nick.
Yeah. I mean, he's just super scared of being on the outs. Like, Amy is not afraid to make a stance for what she believes. She's not afraid
Yeah,
to,
that's
like,
true.
of the
Yeah,
consequences. She's like, hey, if you vote me out the next time because I stood up for what I think is right, like, good for her. Maybe not the
at
best
least
game
she
move
stood up
wise.
for what she went. Yeah,
Yeah. But we'll see how it plays out, honestly. But because you never know. Like, let's say Amy stands up for herself now. She continues, like, physically, it's like strong enough to keep up in 2 or 3 days, alliances could shift. Like somebody backstabs somebody, and all of a sudden nobody thinks of Amy on the outs anymore, or like being on the outs of the vote. So we'll see. But we have very intense conversations going on. Amy ends up telling Jeff that he's a target, which he already kind of knew, but I guess it becomes more real for him. being told directly by some people. There's a very intense conversation between Rob and Amy where she's basically telling him he has to like stand up for him, like vote on how he believes and not be scared of like being on the outs of the majority all the time. And they end this conversation with basically agreeing on that they think they can pull in Jeannie. I think Jeannie and Rob kind of fall into the same category for me. They're kind of floating wherever the majority is.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, it's hard because, like, in this game, you don't want to be on the outs. Like, you want to seem like you're with the majority. So, yeah, I agree. They're floaters at the moment. I don't think they're, like, truly committed to any group or any person.
Yeah, Amy is. We see that she's super aware of Dennis being the one that's like creating havoc around camp, and she's basically on board with voting him out. Manu returns. The group sits down around the fire, and we get a weird Charles Darwin quote. I didn't write it down, but it was definitely a weird one.
Always, like, trying to play off of, like, the, like, survival of the fittest kind of
Yeah, yeah,
deal. And, like, them being, like, out in this raw nature, I guess. But it
yeah,
just, I don't like the way that he, like, brought it up. Like, he could have just said, I don't know. It was just the way he said it.
yeah,
But yeah. But, like, why is he bringing quotes in? He didn't do this before. Like, is he gonna have a new quote, like a daily quote now?
yeah. We see Jeff making a point out of saying, "Vote for who you feel like should vote for, and not for where you think the numbers are going," which I think is kind of a good-ish point to make here. But I think that shows you that Jeff kind of knew it was too late for him at that point. It's kind of a last straw. Jeannie had a bad taste. Like I didn't understand this. Jeannie had a bad. She says she had a bad taste in her mouth because Jeff and Pumpkin voted for food and not to send the people
I
up,
was
which I thought was like you're literally on like on a climb up the mountain show. Obviously, I want food and everybody to climb up, and not somebody to take a taxi up and nobody to get food. What the fuck?
yeah, I was, like, kind of confused about that.
Yeah,
'Cause I was like, I get that, like, they were, like, the 2 that didn't vote, like, with the majority, but my thing is, like, I was on their side, like, I think food would have been a better option. But yeah, I
yeah.
agree, like, what do you mean a bad taste? Like, this wasn't like, "Oh, they voted to, like, send Patty and Amy, like, somewhere." I don't know. Yeah, I agree. It was a weird comment.
I feel like she's just trying to make excuses for herself so she can stay with the majority, in my
Maybe,
opinion. But
yeah.
I don't know. So it's voting time. So Amy, Jeff, and Pumpkin end up voting for Dennis. And with that, the rest of the group, 8 votes in total, vote for Jeff. So Jeff is gone. I don't know. It kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because I feel like it's just a bunch of floaters at some I like half the group is a bunch of floaters. Sorry.
No, I feel like people aren't, like, standing up for their opinion.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's a bunch of floaters, and I'm like, "Okay, is that really how you wanted to vote? Or is it really just that whole, like, I have to be with the majority, I have to be with the majority." But it's not always right now, and I don't know if that's gonna, like, kinda, like, bite them later, like, not standing up for yourself or standing up for what you actually think, but maybe they do. They did actually want, what the majority wanted, so
That's true. I mean, you can always argue once you make a stance, like opinion wise, that you kind of put a target on your back. So maybe they're playing smart strategically. Just in this point, at this point, I thought it was kind of frustrating. So 11 people remain, 870K left. Dennis definitely is getting a villain edit. Becky's still on a high. Um, I think she should be pretty careful, in my opinion.
yeah.
And yeah, with that, maybe let's talk about the next time on next time on the summit real quick, and then I have one final question for you. So on the next time on the summit, we see a lot of fog and snow. We see them maybe being stuck at camp. I'm not completely sure. We see somebody saying that they don't trust Rob, and we see a big fall from someone as well. as them going up a cliff in teams of two, so partnered up.
So that means that somebody has to be left out. So I think
Yeah.
they're gonna have like another like decision to make. I'm really glad we don't see another bridge. I don't need to see another bridge type of
No.
challenge. I was like really excited on this one to see a ladder and not a bridge. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very interested to see like how like this whole like because this whole episode we see Becky Lee like on a high, like how is that going to change in the next episode, and how is that last vote going to influence these potential alliances that we have forming? Because like we said, there's some floaters still there, so I don't think that it's like concrete that it's Amy and Pumpkin on the bottom necessarily, just because they were the other two that didn't vote for that voted for Dennis. I was like
Yeah.
kind of upset to see Jeff leave, but that's the game.
He was
But
on my
yeah,
team.
I'm very I know, yeah. I think it was too early, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm interested to see what happens next.
I'm curious to know, who would you say, if you would have to pick just from this episode, two winners and two losers of the episode from the cast, who would you pick as your two winners?
My two winners,
Well, I can go
like
first. And
winning the whole summit.
no, 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 no. Like winning, like being on a up maybe in this episode, maybe making a really strong bond with someone that you think is going to take them far later. Like just from this episode, what happened in this episode? So, for example, like my two losers would be Pumpkin would be my number one loser, since she lost her alliance number one, like her number one basically. She's on the
I know,
outs.
but I think like her and Amy are gonna possibly bond
Yeah,
together.
but they're two people, so I don't think that's. But for this, just for this episode,
Okay.
I think she's a loser, and then I think Becky is a loser just from the edit she got. She's on. She got the Jeff edit from last episode, like on a high, doing great,
Yeah,
and I think she could be voted out next episode. And then my
possibly,
two
yeah.
winners. Who would be your two winners? You gotta pick the winners.
Like, are you saying for the next episode?
No, just from this, like from this one, and maybe leading into the next one. So for me, one of the winners would be Amy, since even though she was on the wrong side of the vote, I think she stood up for herself, and she was so strong on the ladder. So I think she
Yeah,
really
and
proved
then
herself there.
I mean, I guess Dennis, he came out on top on like the battle, I guess that was happening.
Yeah, that's true. We'll bring back this segment. Now you know, like you can basically take anything. You can be like, "Oh, I think that person's gonna make it far. That's why they're my winner from this episode." You can do. They had this like Dennis ate a fly. That's why he's my winner. Like you can pick anything.
Okay, well, you can't,
uh,
you threw me on the spot. I wasn't thinking about it.
well, next time you know. Now you're prepared. All
Hmm.
right. With that being said, we're at the end of the episode. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, like, comment, subscribe. Um, any last comments from you, Kinley?
Farron, do you wanna? We should play snakes and ladders, or ladders and snakes, and
Yeah,
a board
come
game.
on the show. We should do that.
I
That would be
still
so
want to
fun.
play board games with him
It's
so bad.
true. He must have been so excited.
Right? Alrighty, well, like usual, get outside, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Later.
Bye.